In this video, you are going to learn how to sample anything from your phone into the MPC, from a vinyl record player into the MPC, and how to record sound from external synthesizers, like this Push 3 in my case. And of course, I want to start with cables, because this is really important. And that cable specifically should be the most important thing in your studio. So on the one end, it's the usual 3.5mm jack, and on the other end, it's 2/4-inch jacks. If you're sampling from an iPhone, of course, you'll need this kind of dongle. So 3.5mm jack here, and Lightning or Type-C on the other end, and it goes to your phone. And 1/4-inch jacks, they go into the input 1 and 2 on your MPC. This kind of cable is also a must-have. On one end it's 2 1/4-inch jacks, and on the other end it's also 2 1/4-inch jacks. Again, one end goes into input 1 and 2, and the other end goes into your synthesizer, for example, if your synthesizer is in stereo, or the other end can go into the mixer or SP404, or just any sampler, any synthesizer. First, let's begin with a vinyl record player, because the process with sampling from MPC is quite similar. I'm going to use the same cable, which is 2 1/4-inch jacks on one end and 3.5mm jack on the other end, because in my case with Audio-Technica LP, I have 3.5mm jack out. I would say, unfortunately, I would prefer to have 2 RCA or 2 1/4-inch jacks, but it has only 3.5mm jack out, stereo, which is what I have. So the other end goes into input 1 and 2. And make sure that you switch line input, not phono, because if you switch to phono, it will use the built-in phono correction into your MPC Live, Live 2, or MPC X. MPC 1, 1 Plus, Key 37, they don't have the built-in phono correction. So in order to sample from a vinyl record player, you will need a separate mixer or built-in phono correction into the vinyl record player. This knob right here regulates the incoming signal of your track, of your sample, so regulate this knob while you're listening to the track. Let's take the vinyl. If I start playing right now, we're not going to hear any sound. Let's check. Nothing happens. In order to sample, we go to menu and look for sampler, or I have a shortcut right here, which is quite handy. I press sampler, and we can see that some signal is coming into our MPC. If you don't see anything, please check the settings right here. It should be input 1 and 2 if you have MPC Live, MPC 1, or something like this. If you have MPC X, you have the option to choose input 3 and 4, because your input 1 and 2 are XLR separate inputs, maybe for your microphone, and you have the stereo input 3 and 4. So in your case, you should select input 3 and 4. But we, mere mortals, we have the only input 1 and 2, so we stay at input 1 and 2. And here, of course, we select stereo. In order to have monitoring, to hear the sound, we should press this button, in. So we finally have the sound coming in. However, I want to adjust the loudness. Let's talk about this threshold, because by default it's at infinite setting. However, I prefer setting this value to -38 or something, because by default we have some hiss, we have some, humming coming from the vinyl record or something like this. And if I want to press arm or record, it's not going to record instantly. It's going to wait for the signal, and then the threshold works and we start recording. Let me just go back to sampler again. And maximum length of sampling, it's basically unlimited. I don't know if there is some value. Maximum, okay, 60 minutes, 1 hour. Okay, I usually set it to 10 minutes because this is more than enough. And by the way, while you are recording something from the vinyl, from an iPhone, you can insert some effects, for example, a compressor. This is usually helpful when you record a guitar and you want to boost the signal, and then you want to add, I don't know, maybe some reverb for your guitar. Okay, this is with effects, yes? In that case, of course, it sounds weird, but if you are recording a guitar or a synthesizer, maybe it will help you. So let's arm and record this drum break. Stop and stop. What I always do at this point, I name my sample, the name of the band, the name of the track, but for now I am just going to use sample drum. I always save my recorded samples. So I press save, go to my SD card, find my folder for samples, and I save all my recorded samples into the dedicated folder. This is very important. And you do this, but I don't. Just I go back and I say keep this sample. And where is this sample now? This sample is now in sample edit. So double tap, boom, you're in sample edit. Let's preview this orange pad. Okay, it's recorded. Let's check if we can normalize process. Normalize the sound. Maybe it's going to be a bit louder, maybe not. I think it's the same. Anyway, we go to chop and we can chop it manually or by threshold. Let's check. I don't like these settings. No, I don't like it. So shift clear all. Let's do this manually. Okay, I'll stop for now. When I'm done, I press shift, convert, new drum track using slices, pad parameters. Do it. Main screen. And here's my sample. Full level. What can I do next? I go to mixer, for example, effects. I want to apply some compression. So I go to add compressor, this, that. Maybe something like this. I can go to track edit, pitch it down, for example. I can rearrange these drums, so I select poly, go to samples. This is going to be my slice 4. No, 5. This is going to be a snare, hat, maybe secondary kick. It's going to be lower in volume. Is it 5? Yes, it's 5, so no. Let's select this, lower the volume. It's going to be ghost kick, so to say. Like this. So this is actually how you sample from a vinyl record player into the MPC. The second section is recording samples from your iPhone into the MPC. And I have two issues right here, because currently my iPhone is recording video of my MPC right here. However, the biggest issue is that I have a dongle right here from 3.5mm jack to Lightning. And I recently updated my iPhone to 15 Pro Max, and it has the not Lightning connector, but a Type-C connector. But believe me, it's the same process. So I take the cable 3.5mm jack from a vinyl record player, I do it like this, I plug this end into my iPhone, and I repeat the same process. I go to sampler, this is the sampler right here. I select monitor in, input 1 and 2, stereo, at the back it's going to be line. I'm going to arm, that I'm going to play the sample from Spotify, YouTube or somewhere. I'm going to record the sample. And the same thing, it goes to sample edit, you go to chop, or you try to normalize first, you go to chop, you chop your samples, then shift convert with these settings, then it's here on the main screen, and you do everything that you want with this sample. So sampling from an iPhone and sampling from a laptop, a vinyl record player is the same thing. However, sometimes the vinyl record player has two outputs, maybe two RCA jacks or two 1/4" jacks. In that case, you select not this cable, but the second cable that I showed you with 1/4" jacks on one end and two 1/4" jacks on the other end, and you repeat the process. It's the same workflow. Thank you, vinyl. So sampling from external synthesizers has basically the same workflow as sampling from an iPhone or a vinyl record player. I'm going to use the same cable, which is 3.5mm jack on one end and two 1/4" jacks at the back of my MPC, which I didn't touch, didn't change. However, this time I'm going to show you a bad example, because sometimes showing a bad example is even better than showing good examples, because I'm going to use this not very good, cheap, scrappy dongle like this from 3.5 to 1/4" stereo, because you can see there are two marks. Why do I say that this is a bad example? Because you're going to hear there is going to be some humming and some noise, because you can see that this connection is quite wobbly, and please never do this in your studio. Unfortunately, I have to do this right now because my other cable records the signal into my computer, which goes into the camera so that you are able to listen to this video, yes? But for now, for demonstration purpose, I'm going to use this very bad thing. So normally I would use the 2/4 inch on one end and 2/4 inch on the other end and go into left and right output. However, I'm going to insert into the headphones output right now. So we go to sampler, make sure that we have monitoring in. Yes, it works. However, recording from external synthesizer is a little bit different than recording from iPhone or vinyl record player, because you need to record the sound, which is audio sound. This is the audio sound. However, you can also trigger the notes that are recorded in the MPC using the MIDI cable, or actually it's better to use the stock cable that comes with your MPC. So this end goes to the USB port of your MPC and the other end goes into your synthesizer. However, why am I not using this now? Because unfortunately Push 3 doesn't work this way. However, this is the best way to connect your synthesizer, for example, Minimoog, Novation, or anything to your MPC, because with USB it uses the protocol, the MIDI USB protocol. It connects both ways. So from MPC it sends the MIDI notes to your synthesizer, and from your synthesizer it sends the notes to your MPC using one cable. However, in my case I need to use two cables like this. This end is the usual 5-pin MIDI out, and this one is also MIDI, but 3.5mm MIDI, because Push 3 has 3.5 to MIDI, and this end goes to your input, and from output it goes to the input of the Push 3. I'm not going to connect them via MIDI right now. This is of course available at our course, but we are going to record the signal only. So again, we create new track, audio, and we are ready to record. Just record, play start. Something like this. We press stop, and here is our recorded sample. We can go into the settings, track edit, we can edit something, we can rearrange, reverse, the usual things that we do with our recorded samples. And of course, it stays here in sample edit. However, sometimes you may miss it, because if you double press, it is now not in memory, where we have our recorded sample from the iPhone or vinyl record player. It is now in streaming, because it streams from your SD card, which is very cool. Of course, you can change this. If you press menu, you press project, there is this audio 001. You understand that green is streaming. You long press and say load to memory. Now it's in the same folder memory, but it doesn't really matter. So I prefer keeping something in streaming and something just in the RAM of my project. Of course, when you connect the synthesizer via USB or MIDI cables, when you have MIDI notes and when you press record and play, you don't need to press some keys on the synthesizer. You can just press play, and the MIDI notes, because you create new track, MIDI track, the MIDI notes, they will trigger the synthesizer, and the audio from the synthesizer can be recorded on the audio track. It's really easier than it sounds. And of course, if you want to learn more about the MPC workflow, I have special educational courses just for you. And it's not those masterclass type videos or just me showing off my skills. No, it's a step-by-step program where we start from scratch and end up having a full, complete track. Join our community to become a professional. The link is in the description.